Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video. Welcome back to the penetration testing bootcamp, more specifically the Windows privilege escalation series. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to elevate our privileges by exploiting misconfigured autoruns, and I'll get to what autoruns are in a few seconds, right? So we've already taken a look at service exploitation, and we're now moving on to the registry, right? And in particular, this is not really, the process of elevating your privileges through the registry, but rather obtaining information that is typically stored within the Windows registry. So what is AutoRuns, right? Or what is the AutoRun feature on Windows? Well, AutoRun is a Windows feature that is typically utilized to automatically start applications and programs during system startup, right? And an example of this would, typically be a program like Steam. So whenever you start up your system, if you've configured a Steam to start up, then, Steam will usually start up and it'll update itself if there's an update. And that, again, is typically done by actual developers, to actually check for updates, to if it's a persistent service that actually requires, that needs to be running in order to function correctly, then it'll be started up whenever you essentially start up your system and log in. All right, now in terms of exploiting AutoRun programs or executables that have been configured to start on system startup, there are a few parameters that we need to be aware of. Number one, we need to be, the system actually needs to have, AutoRun programs or executables that have been configured to start up during the system startup. Secondly, the program we actually need the actual path of the program to be modifiable by any user on the system. And that will essentially allow us to replace the legitimate executable with our own malicious executable. And in this case, we would typically replace it with a interpreter payload that we've generated with MSF Venom. Okay, now in terms of identifying the AutoRun executables, we can do this manually and automatically. If we are to start off with doing it manually, we can essentially, perform a registry query through the command prompt, and the actual registry, registry that we're interested in is under HKey local machine, software, Microsoft Windows current version, and run. And then run will actually store the various keys, and in this case, the keys are the actual AutoRun programs or executables. And this particular query will actually display the AutoRun programs as well as their respective paths, which is very important in this context. So what I'll do is I'll just copy that there, and we'll head over into my interpreter session. I've already obtained a interpreter session on the target system. Now, you may have realized that I'm doing this on Ubuntu. Well, the reason I'm doing this is, again, I got a lot of heat for my last video. And a lot of people were saying you really can't do what you typically do on Ubuntu. Well, I'm doing it now. So MSF console or Metasploit is installed and working. So I've really just installed just 3 or 4 tools that I need to record this video just to show you that it does work. Anyhow, if I say, sysinfo, let me just verify to you that I'm not using an elevated or I don't have an elevated session here. You can see I'm currently utilizing the user account, which is unprivileged. And of course, if I say get privs, you can see that we only have 3 privileges here, and this is not a privileged account, nor is it part of the local administrators group. So what we can do is, let me just open up a command prompt here. I'll say shell, paste in the actual registry query command, hit enter, and it'll actually display the various keys. So you have a security health program, and then it provides you with the path to that particular program. And then you have a program called My Program, which is, again, has been set up to demonstrate this particular technique. And the path to that program is under C, program files, AutoRun program, and program.exe. All right, so now that we've identified a particular AutoRun program, we can utilize access check to identify or to essentially enumerate the permissions for that folder in regards to what users can actually make changes to that particular program path, and consequently replace or delete the actual executable itself. But in our case, we'll be replacing it with our own interpreter payload that we've generated with MSF Venom. So let's take a look at the try hack me documentation here. So the access check utility or executable has already been provided for us on the target system under a directory called privesc, as you already know if you've been following along with this series. And I'll just copy the actual arguments here because, again, every time we launch access check, we need to accept the EULA. And really, we're just checking for permission. So WVU and then the actual path to that AutoRun program. So what we can do here is I'm just going to navigate back into the root of the C drive, and under privesc, there we go. We have access check, I believe. Let me make sure that is there. There we are. So that's there. So I'll say access chk.exe, paste in the arguments there, hit enter. And you can see that for the current user, so that's the users group there, we pretty much have file all access, read and write. So that means that we can currently make changes to the particular directory or the path of this particular AutoRun executable. Right now, the last variable that I wanted to highlight in regards to elevating our privileges through this particular technique is, again, going back to how AutoRun programs work. Remember that they're executed when a user logs in or authenticates, either physically or via RDP. So the user you authenticate as, or, for example, if we authenticate as the administrator, then the program will be executed, right? And typically that might not be required because in the case of RDP, all you really need to do is just attempt to authenticate and the program, will be executed, right? So we can actually test and see how this is working. And before we do that, you can also automate the process of finding these AutoRun programs or executables with WinPs. And I want to highlight both techniques so that you guys are actually aware of this. So within the temp directory, I've uploaded the WinPs x64 binary there. Disregard shell.exe. I was using that for a few tests, but we'll get to that when we get there. So WinPs x64.exe, and we're not going to run any specific checks. We're just going to run enumerate all the information or run all the checks that WinPs would typically perform. So I'll hit enter. And this will take a few seconds. And we're looking for a specific piece of information or a specific check that is pertinent to the Windows Registry, which I believe is, it should be under its own section. Let me see if I can identify that here. And for some reason, yeah, I've reached the maximum for my terminal. Let me actually configure that right now. So preferences, I should have actually increased the actual scrolling limit. So limit scroll back to no limiting there. And we can probably run it again, but we should have it here because I know WinPs performs some registry checks. So what I'll do is let me just run that again. So WinPs, let me make sure I'm typing that correctly. So dir, so yeah, there we are. WinPs x64.exe, hit enter, and I should be able to find that piece of information now. So that's done. Let me just scroll up. Okay, because I know it actually checks it with WMI or runs a few WMI checks, and there we are, it actually identifies there. So there we are, key from WMIC. The folder, it actually tells us the AutoRun program there as well as the security health program. And in the case of program.exe, you can see the file permissions are listed here. So everyone has all access. I'm just looking for the registry section. I believe it should be here. This is the one here, I believe. So, no, this is still checking for different types of vulnerabilities. It is probably above this here. Let me see if I can identify it. There are a few there, checks. There we are, AutoRun applications. That's what I was looking for. So I'll actually display various AutoRun applications and it identifies program.exe. So file permissions, everyone, all access. Although you probably need to disregard the unquoted, unquoted file path there because it was actually quoted. But there you are. That's what we're looking for. File permissions, everyone, all access. Okay. So now that we've done that, what we can do now is let's navigate to the root of the C drive, and I'll just switch back into my interpreter. So I'll terminate that channel there and navigate to the root of the C drive. So that's under program files. Program files. Sorry, my bad. My keyboard isn't actually working correctly today. Type that in there. So program files, there we are. And we're looking for the AutoRun program. Okay. So that's what we need to replace. So I'm just going to generate a new program, right? And I'm just going to generate the payload with MSF Venom, and I'm going to call it program.exe. There's one thing that I want to check before I do this, however, and that is my session. So my initial access to this target system was via PowerShell. So if I list out my sessions there, that's using port 4444 and sorry, let me navigate to my other tab here. Let me put this in the background. Sessions, that is using 1234. So for that payload, we can use the port 4433, I believe. All right, so sessions 1, back in there. dir. All right, so we're currently within that directory. All right, so cool. So I'll navigate there into my documents directory. Yeah, I'm currently within the correct directory. So I'll say MSF Venom. MSF Venom. Let me see if I'm typing that incorrectly. MSF Venom, and I already have the Z Shell plugin doing its work for me. And we'll change this to port 4433, and we'll output this as program.exe. Program.exe. That's my IP address there. Hit enter. So that will generate it for me. And then we can upload it directly. So we'll give this a couple of seconds. There we are. And I will now, we actually need to set up the handler for that, which is very important. And I already created a handler here. So we'll change that to port 4433. 4433, there we are. Write and quit. So MSF console r handler.rc. That'll set up the handler for us to receive the connection once the AutoRun, the malicious AutoRun executable is executed. We now need to transfer the program.exe, or rather replace the original one. And we can do that with Meterpreter. So back into my Meterpreter session, upload documents, tryhackme, Windows Privesc, program.exe. Okay, so that should have replaced it. And what we can do now is, let me make sure my handler is set up. Okay, so let's take a look at the documentation provided to us in the room, right? So start the Kali listener, or start a listener on Kali, and then restart the Windows VM. We'll probably lose our sessions. That's fine. Open up a new RDP session to trigger a reverse shell running with admin privileges. You should not have to authenticate to trigger it. However, if the payload does not fire, log in as admin and admin password 123 to trigger it. Note that in the real-world engagement, you would have to wait for an administrator to log in themselves. So we are going to assume that we are all of a sudden the administrator for purposes of demonstration. So can I restart it directly here from Ramina? Probably. Let's try it. So restart. I keep forgetting that this is a Windows server, so we'll probably lose all our sessions, which is fine as long as we configured everything correctly. And we can then connect once it's restarted. So I'm just going to wait for it to reboot, and then I'll try and authenticate again with Ramina using the admin credentials. All right, so it looks like it's rebooted. So I'll just log in, admin password 123. That's the credentials for the admin account. Hit OK. And we should get a Meterpreter session. So it's going to start or log us in to the administrator account. So if we did everything correctly, we should get a Meterpreter session here. Let's see. It's not sending the stage, so that looks like it failed. Let's see. There we are. It actually executes. So that's not my fault. That's the actual VM. But yeah, once you log in, it should automatically be executed, and it sends the stage. And we should get an elevated Meterpreter session because the administrator logs in. So this particular technique is very nuanced in that it requires an action from legitimate users in order for this to work. right? So as I said, you typically have to wait for the administrator or a privileged user to log in. So, get user ID, admin, get privs, and there we are. So this doesn't look like it's privileged. Can we migrate to a privileged process? Like, do we have LSAS running here? Keep forgetting that I'm running in tmux. That doesn't look privileged to me. But yeah, I believe this user has privileges, although we pretty much would need to bypass UAC. So that's something that we can actually explore. But we can migrate maybe to SVC host, or process running as NT authority. Let's see if I can find the process that I'm looking for here. Do we have that running now? So 3788. So 3788. Give that a couple of seconds. Hopefully it doesn't fail. Get user ID, get privs. Yeah, we can probably, I know that this user is privileged. And again, if let me actually see if we have any impersonation tokens or access tokens that we can impersonate. So list tokens U. Yeah, so no NT authority system. So we can probably perform, we can actually bypass UAC. However, this user is privileged. And of course, if, we can say get system. Let's see whether that actually gives us, yeah, that tries essentially named pipe impersonation. But yeah, that is a privileged user. Now, if we wanted NT authority system privileges, then the most likely way or technique that we would need to leverage is going to be bypassing UAC. Now, I don't know whether I want to introduce that in here or in this video. Probably not, because I'm going to be covering it, right? And bypassing UAC is essentially applicable when we're in a situation like this, where we have access to a user that is privileged or part of the local administrators group, right? However, in order for us to do anything that requires privileges on the target system, for example, or if an administrator is using that system and they ran something as administrator, they would be prompted to either accept or deny on the actual UAC consent prompt or the dialog box. Now, because we're doing this remotely, we can't do that, so we have to find a way of bypassing that. And there's multiple tools that you can use, but because this is Windows Server, I don't think there are any Metasploit modules that can actually be used to do this automatically, because this needs to be done manually. And I'll probably be covering that within its own video, because I'm going to be covering a tool called UAC Me and telling you or showing you the various techniques you can use to bypass UAC. But regardless of that, this is a privileged user. Now, as per the instructions within this particular task, it says that we don't need to authenticate as the administrator. All we really need to do is open up a new RDP session. So what we can do is we'll exit from there, and I'll just say back here. And what I'll do is I'll take a look at my sessions, nothing there. And we say, use multi-handler. There we go, show options. Should have the options configured already for us, and I hit run. And we open up a new RDP session with our desktop. Probably have to install that. So apt get install our desktop. There we are. And we can then authenticate manually. So again, you can see Ubuntu is still working, although I don't have any of these tools installed, but it should be set up immediately for us here without an issue. So give this a couple of seconds. There we are. Let's authenticate. Do I trust the certificate? Yes, I do. Okay, so that does not authenticate us as any user. So if we go back to, let's go back into my terminal here. Let's see if that actually works, right? Because we've not authenticated, right? Now we probably need to restart the system again. So that's really what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to restart it. Right, so I've restarted the system, and I reinitiated my RDP session with our desktop, but I haven't received a stage yet. So that's probably why they've added the documentation here that an administrator or a privileged user will need to log in, or in order to gain access. And of course, this can really backfire, because if a standard user with no real privileges logs in, then that AutoRun program will be executed with their privileges. So you probably have to keep multiple jobs listening, or multiple handlers listening for a connection until you get the admin logging in, right? But this really isn't elevating your privileges, as I said, because you may be part of the administrators group. However, you don't have anti-authority system privileges. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to just leave it off here, and we're just going to complete this, because I'm not sure whether this room covers bypassing UAC. I will cover that independently, because that really is very important and is something you will run across when performing a real penetration test. Right, so in the next video, we'll get started with one of my favorite, which is the always install elevated feature. And again, this really doesn't involve exploiting the registry. All you're doing here is utilizing the registry to identify whether the always install elevated feature is enabled, right? Once you know that that is the case, you can generate an MSI or a Windows installation file, and you can then essentially utilize the MSI exec tool to install it with elevated privileges, as that is what the always install elevated feature is there for. And that will consequently provide you with an elevated Meterpreter session. All right, so that is going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, leave it in the comments section. If you want to reach out to me, you can do so by contacting me via Twitter, or you can join in the discussion by joining our Discord server. The Discord server, or the link to the Discord server, is in the description section. So do check that out. And as always, I'll be seeing you in the next video. A huge thank you to all of our Patreons. Your support is greatly appreciated, and this is a formal thank you. So thank you Shamir Douglas, Ryan Carr, Sandor, Michael Busby, Sid Saab, Doozy, Tafim Bari, Dustin Umpress, and Michael Hubbard. Your support is greatly appreciated, and you keep us making even more high quality content for you guys. So thank you.